Hello, welcome. This is Beehive Quilt Shop. I'm Annarose White, and you're on our YouTube channel. Welcome. We hope you enjoy some of our tutorials. We like to share some of our favorite ideas, upcoming classes, different techniques, and of course, things that nobody else has told you. So you can always like and subscribe and follow on our YouTube channel to stay most up to date, but you can definitely share this with your friends. Today we're going to do a little video just talking about binding. Binding is one of our most favorite things because even if it's not your favorite thing, that sense of completion is just so wonderful. So here we're in Wellington, Kansas. We have a brick and mortar store and we sell online. We also have a retreat center that's called the Hive Retreat House that's just 5 blocks north of our store. And recently we have been preparing to do a couple different binding classes. And there's just a couple things that make it really easy if you are going to do some binding. And so I'm just going to do a little quick recap on some different techniques of binding and a few different tools that can make it really helpful. So I'm just going to start off with this because it's just on top. But this is a little pumpkin table. It's not a table topper. It's like a wall quilt. It's a mini quilt, not an actual mini quilt because those have rules. This is just a small art quilt. But it's a pumpkin quilt from Cluck Cluck Sew. And when I was doing this project, I really I like high contrast binding, and I could not find the exact shade of this color of orange from Fig Tree that was available in an RFL thread color. And because I like to do machine binding both ways, which means I like to attach it from the back and I like to pull it forward and top stitch it, that's my preferred method of machine binding. But because I couldn't find top stitching thread that would just blend or melt in, I decided to go high contrast and try a decorative stitch for the first time. And so you can get a little close look of that. I'm a utilitarian quilter is what I call myself. I am not a precision binder, but we do have some amazing teachers that do teach more precision binding. But what that decorative stitch is most of us have machines at home that can do a decorative stitch. And so many people don't use that enough. I'm even guilty of that myself. And so if you're going to do a decorative stitch on your binding, 1, it just makes it look fancy. 2, you get to use things that are on your machine that you haven't gotten to use before. And 3, it's just you're being playful anyway. It's fine. The whole point of binding is that you just want to cover up the exposed batting from your quilting, and you just want to give your quilt a clean finished edge. So it doesn't have to be something that's perfect unless you're a competition quilter. If you're a competition quilter, this is not the YouTube video for you. There are other things for competition binding, but this is just about for us ordinary quilters who just want to do a better job with our binding. So if you want to try decorative binding on your different projects, you can do it with cotton thread, you can do it with polyester, you might want it to be shiny, you could even go for metallic if you feel like it. But the big rule for binding that makes it, I think, so much easier is that if you use a walking foot to attach and top stitch your binding. We're a Brother dealer, and I especially love Brother's dynamic walking foot. It's an amazing foot, and it's actually engineered and designed to do decorative stitches. Most walking feet are like this, and they're just ordinary walking feet. But these ordinary walking feet are not designed to do decorative stitches. If you try to do a decorative stitch with a walking foot, they can go break and they go like clump, 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 and they just die, and you can tell because it just sounds terrible. That means your walking foot is probably some mechanical part in there is broken, and most machine techs aren't going to be able to fix a walking foot. It just means you need to buy another $100 foot-ish. But a dynamic walking foot really is worth the investment. From Brother, but it only works for Brother machines, of course. But the other thing that makes it unique is that there's actual detachable feet for the dynamic walking foot. So it has a standard foot, and you can buy a pack that has a 1/4 inch foot and a stitch in the ditch foot. So it can really make binding or top stitching, or even if you're doing garment stuff, it can be helpful. But for those same reasons, it makes it great to do binding with. So I highly recommend a dynamic walking foot if you're going to do decorative binding on here. One of my tricks for binding is I love to attach the binding from the back first. And one of the things that makes it go so much faster for me is I do like to lengthen my stitch length to a 3 when I'm doing a normal cotton binding. And that's just something for me I found over the years Like I said, I'm a utilitarian quilter. And I'm a mom. I work. I have just a limited amount of time to do binding, and so I'm in a hurry. I want to get it done. And so if you lengthen your stitch length, one, it's less stitches for your machine to go through, but you can also notice that you're able to sew a little bit faster. But one of the other reasons why you want to lengthen your stitch length when you're binding is because your binding is thick. When you are binding a quilt, you have to think about you're binding the back, the front, and you're going through whatever layer of batting that you have, and that is way more than just piecing 2 pieces of cotton fabric together. So a standard setting on your machine may be too short, because once you go through all those layers, a normal stitch length is actually going to look shorter because it doesn't have because it has all that bulk in between. So just experiment, try out a 3, see what you think. But I know that for me, when I'm attaching my binding, it goes a lot faster, and it just makes it go better. I happen to be touching the opposite end of the spectrum, which this is done by Mary Jane. I did not make this. I wish I could say I had, but this is a fun quilt from K Facet, and the brilliant little patchwork book that they have, and it's called Summer Flowers. It's a great picnic quilt. Mary Jane uses it as a table topper, but she has a wave border. And so when we teach classes on binding, when we have several guest teachers all on the same day, Mary Jane covers how to do this flange piping hot binding. And so this is like our favorite product, that if you're going to do this, whether you're doing it at home or you have the opportunity to take a class in person, but piping hot binding is an amazing tool to give you an idea of how to start doing projects like this. There's other tools and dinner plates out there for figuring out how you're going to do a wave or how you're going to do a scallop border. But when you do binding, you can also do piping, and you can do flange, and you can do all these different layers of piping. There's so many different thicknesses of, this is actually called cable cord. And then this is the standard piping that comes in the piping hot binding kit. So that's just a really cool thing that you can consider doing and thinking about. We cover those in our classes, but if you're curious about it and want to be self-taught, highly recommend this. That's how Mary Jane started off her career of what I call fancy binding. But piping hot binding comes with the grooving piping trim tool, but she also now has something called the grande grooving pipe tool. She's just a super fun person, the Susan lady. So if you're looking for tools, that's the best thing if you want to do flange or piping for your binding, or specifically if you're going to do piping or that cable cord and your binding. It's a great way to do it, but it just adds so much to a quilt. From what Mary Jane has told us, and I really do believe this woman, but she said it really is easy. It just requires a tiny bit of planning to figure out how much cable cord you're going to need for the edge of your quilt. But earlier when we were talking about it, most of the time, like even if you're going to do a king size quilt, that is going to be 12 yards worth of binding that you have to make for that if it's 108 by 108. And so if you were purchasing piping or cable cord to do binding or flange, I would buy 13, because 13 is just a good number. It's Taylor Swift's favorite number, but it also gives you just that little bit extra. So if you're worried about not having enough, that works really well. But if you are going to try this technique, we always recommend to start off with a small project first so that it's not overwhelming and that you're not working on your most precious quilt first. Even if you just quilt up an old orphan block and then put some binding around that and experiment, that's a great thing to do. We are also a Shannon Cuddle Center here at Beehive Quilt Shop. And so Shannon Cuddle is simply like the best polyester, fluffy, cool stuff that you can put on the backs of your quilts. We do have a long arm quilting service here at the shop, and we also recommend a lot of other long armors in the area, and which is wonderful. And so most of the people in our ecosystem are very good at quilting cotton quilts with cuddle on the back. And this is a 90-inch cuddle from Shannon, and I'm pretty sure this color is royal. Shannon's in the process of making all of their C3 cuddles into 90-inch cuddle colors, and so that's something that's super exciting. We always have a really extensive selection of cuddle, extra wide cuddle in our shop, so if you're looking for how to look it up, I think it's C390 is a code that you can use, or you can just say extra wide. Or my favorite thing is to just type in 90 with the little inch mark, and then you can just see all the stuff that they have. But these colors are beautiful. 90 inches is really great to work with. We get questions too sometimes on like if you can piece cuddle. You absolutely can. This stuff pieces really well. And a lot of people get nervous about using the nap, like if it goes which way you're putting it on your quilt. So if you are taking it to a new long armor, you may consider pinning the top of the quilt and the bottom so they know what direction to put your cuddle on. But you can definitely piece this to make it even bigger if you needed to put 90-inch cuddle on a king size quilt. Totally a thing. But back to binding. If you have put cuddle on the back of your quilt and you have cotton on the front, you can go both ways. You can either put a cuddle binding on, you can wrap the back to the front. My favorite way to do that though is I still like to use cotton binding on my cuddle backed quilts. And I like that for a couple different reasons, but honestly, it's just, I just love it. There's just, cuddle doesn't have stripes, and I'm honestly a big stripe binding fan. And so this isn't really even a stripe, but it has the look of a stripe. And so that's why I like to do cotton. But if you are gonna bind on a cuddle backed quilt, I would still recommend using a 90-14 stretch needle from Schmetz. And here's my little handy dandy little thing. Schmetz is just a great needle company. And the big thing to remember when you're doing binding with needles is that you just want to make sure that you have, that your needle isn't breaking. I always tell people there's a lot of correct things. There's a lot of needles that are going to work, and the only needles that don't work are the ones that break. So if you want the very best needle for your project, having the Schmetz booklet on needles really is helpful. Typically you can get that for free at your local quilt shop. We have some stacks of those that are available, but I honestly don't do a good enough job telling people that they exist. But this is an even more helpful tool. So we keep this at our shop right above our needles. But this gives you a really nice bird's eye view of exactly what those needles tips look like. If you are doing binding, I like a top stitch needle works really well because it has a nice big eye and it has a sturdy tip. You don't want to use a microtex needle when you're binding because those have an ultra fine tip and aren't necessarily designed to go through these thick, heavy layers. So you can still use universal needles, jeans needles. Like I said, I like a top stitch needle because I do top stitch my binding. And so this one kind of melts in and you can't see it quite as well, but I've got another quilt here that I'm just gonna add to the top of the pile. I'll keep piling up quilts, it's just the best. So I like to attach my binding on the backside first, and then I top stitch it on the front. And I do that for a couple reasons because I like how it looks, and really binding just has to be functional and it just has to work for you. So don't get too worried on precision binding unless you're a competition quilter. And then I'm sure there are other cool friends on YouTube that have precision binding for competition quilt techniques. I know a few people who do that. They talk about fullness of binding, all these detailed things. But really for us, we just want to get your stack of unbound quilts bound because it's a better trophy than having unbound quilts. Although I need to listen to my own advice because I currently have at least 10 projects that need binding. So that's why we're starting to do some more classes on binding here at the shop, because it's also just helpful to do, hard things as a group. It's like nobody's meant to do, you're not meant to do quilting all the time on your own. If you do have an opportunity to go to a community center, a senior center, a church, a shop, do your binding, do it for a retreat, turn it into a whole day. That's why our binding class lasts an entire day, even though we can actually give you the instructions for how to do binding in about 20 minutes to an hour with good questions. But when you are going to be top stitching and machine binding, one of my big recommendations is lengthening your stitch length because it helps accommodate for all the thickness layers of your quilt, especially if you're someone who has a fluffier batting or you like to put flannel or cuddle on the backs of your quilts. It's really important to lengthen your stitch length because otherwise your machine's normal stitch length is really designed for piecing. It's not designed for going through thick objects. And so you want to lengthen your stitch length to a 3 is what I prefer to do myself. But again, you have to do whatever works for you. But I just love the satisfaction of top stitching from the front. It's just my absolute favorite. So, this ladybug fabric, just, this is totally sold out. It's a great wide back from Tula Pink, but it's just gone forever. So also don't worry, buy your backing fabric in advance. Have a stash of backings. That's why people buy 3-yard chunks of it, just because you never know because you just never know when a shop is gonna sell out of something, and who knows how long it will be till Tula does big ladybugs again. We don't know. I should have had more. I should have bought myself a whole bolt of it. But binding quilts really can be fun, but it's really gonna go best if you have a walking foot. It's gonna go best if you have color matching thread to match your binding fabric. I also, if you like to do machine binding both ways, if you're someone like me, I like to attach it from the back and pull it over to the front. And that means I also will coordinate my bobbin thread to match the back fabric of my quilt. So if my binding is a high contrast, like this one, my back was a charcoal color, and my decorative binding, I purposely did it off to the edge so that you could see some of it from the back and the front. But that also meant that even if I would have done my traditional method of when I normally do top stitch binding, I would have matched this color of my fabric in my bobbin, and I would have matched this color of binding fabric in my top thread if I wasn't doing a high contrast decorative stitch binding. So that's just something that I like to do, because then it melts into the back of the quilt and no one's going to tell your imperfections, but you are going to see the top of your binding. And so that's why I like it to match. You can also do a different method where you stitch in the ditch and you just match the top of your quilt. Again, it's whatever brings you joy. We just want to help you have the courage to finish binding your quilts. And if binding really doesn't end up being your jam, or you have a friend that really doesn't like to, but it's keeping them from making more quilts, we have found a local lady here in our area, and she absolutely loves to bind quilts for other people. And so it's a special service she offers that she will bind your quilts for you. And that is definitely something that's also very good, because the other thing I tell people about binding is that a lot of people could change the oil in their cars. Most of us don't like to do that. And that's why we take our car to the place to get an oil change, because someone else can do it better, faster, and that's their thing. But I do truly love binding, and so I don't really want to give it to Mary to bind, because I actually do like binding, but I just need to make dedicated time to do it myself. So that's my tip for you, is to just make it a whole day. If you're a quilt shop and you're teaching a class, turn it into a whole day. If you're a quilt guild, make a whole sew day at your community center where all you do is binding, because it just gets you over the hump, and then you can get four quilts, you can get caught up. It's just wonderful. So we hope you get to binding. If you're curious about the quilt behind me, we'll put a link in the comments about it. It's just a half log cabin quilt I invented as a string quilt, so it's got lots of different sizes in there. I was inspired by So Hungry Hippie, who's another great channel you can pay attention to. But hope you've enjoyed this overview about binding. I think I totally forgot to talk about these feet though. I'm gonna talk about that really quick. I think I did this in my Facebook Live and I forgot to do it for our YouTube. But this is a MuVit foot from Brother, and this is a belt-driven walking foot. And so earlier at the beginning of the video, I was talking about normal walking feet and how they work, and why it's really helpful to have those to go through all your layers of your quilt. But if you are a Brother customer and you have a machine, and some of them are capable of having a MuVit foot, and those are magic for binding. And if you don't have one of these, it truly is a great reason to upgrade to get a Quilt Club 2500 or 3100 machine, or you can get the combo machines that come with them as well. But they have snap-on feet, which work incredibly well. I do put lots of cuddle on the backs of my quilts, and so I need some extra oomph when I'm attaching it. And these feet have detachable feet. I keep seeing feet a lot, almost as much as Dr. Seuss. But anyway, this is a 1/4 inch piecing foot on a dual feed MuVit foot. And when I attach my quilts, I like to do 2 1/4 binding, which doesn't give you a lot of room for air. And so attaching it with a 1/4 inch foot gives you the confidence to know that you're attaching it correctly to your quilt, and that you're going to be consistent is the most important thing. So it's just very important to be consistent. but the belt-driven walking foot that's called the MuVit foot or the dual feed foot from Brother really makes that easy. When I've attached my binding to the back of the quilt, I then go top stitch it. So after I'm all the way done putting that together, I'm gonna take this foot off and I put on an open toe foot, so that way I can easily tell where I'm going. And so when I'm top stitching, I can 100% see where I'm headed, and I just do little chunks at a time. I think I've got some different still pictures of me doing binding before. We'll maybe turn that into a reel. We'll have to find that out of the archives, but this MuVit foot makes just binding worthwhile. It's just amazing. It just goes so smoothly with this. But if you don't have the capability of having a MuVit foot, you can consider upgrading your machine, or at least use a normal walking foot, but ideally a dynamic walking foot if you're a Brother customer. So those, I think, are now all my tips. So just hope you have fun and get to tackle some binding. And just know that if you have 10 unbound quilts, you are not alone. If you sleep under a quilt that's not bound, you are not alone. If you've been doing it for several years for one of your quilts, I mean, I sleep under like 7. I'm going to be serging mine with the Brother Airflow serger because I have some raggedy edges, which again is the whole point of binding, is to cover up and protect those edges of your quilts so that those quilts can last longer. So you're not alone if you have a lot of binding to do. And I hope some of these tips were helpful, and you can like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, Beehive Quilt Shop, or come see us in person here in Wellington, Kansas. And it would just be fun to see you. So happy and good luck binding. You can do it.